Hello, I'm Kristen Lyons, and this video is addressing question 1 for EPSY 5340, History and Systems of Educational Psychology. In order to understand what educational psychology is, it's important to understand its origins and important figures in the field over time. Berliner's The 100-Year Journey of Educational Psychology provided an abundant amount of information in regards to the roots of educational psychology. The emergence of educational psychology can be tied to the same year as the organization of the American Psychological Association. The time frame was 1890 to 1910. During these years, American psychology separated from its European roots and began to create its own identity. Even though this time is marked as the beginning of educational psychology, the field actually began long before 1890. Ideas related to educational psychology can be traced all the way back to 5th century BC, even to Plato and Aristotle. Some of the important figures of educational psychology include William James, G. Stanley Hall, John Dewey, James Cattell, Goddard, Terman, Gesell, and of course, E. L. Thorndike. As I learned about each individual that made an impact in the history of educational psychology, I gained a better understanding of the different aspects of educational psychology. It was interesting to see that the ideas from this field can be traced all the way back to the time of Christ. World War II actually provided opportunity and progress for the field. The war required psychologists to solve practical problems instead of laboratory problems, such as the problem of rapidly teaching masses of men to reach acceptable levels of competency in hundreds of specialty areas. Real-world instruction has begun to guide the development of instructional psychology. Berliner states, this time, the psychology of school subjects is not merely the common sense psychology of Thorndike, but a cognitive psychological approach that is equally concerned about the thinking of the learner, the structure of the discipline to be learned, and the form of explanations available to the teacher. Methodology is expanded to use cases, naturalistic studies, qualitative research, and small samples. Less interest is given to classical standardized testing of achievement, and more concern has been given to portfolios, performance tests, informal assessment, and program evaluation. Other current trends actually link back to the ideas of James, Hall, and Dewey. Educational psychologists are working to redefine the field so that it recognizes both the importance of understanding the problems of the individual struggling to make schooling successful and the importance of our disciplinary perspective. Overall, the fundamental goals of educational psychology should be to understand and improve education in society. Fagan states, even though the specialty school psychology did not achieve a stable national identity until the second half of the 20th century, the provision of psychological services in schools is among the earliest fields of applied psychology. Applied and professional psychology originated in the 19th and early 20th centuries. During this time of origination, social reforms were taking place. With compulsory schooling, children were required by law to be in attendance, which dramatically changed public education. The law required attendance uncovered new problems such as large numbers of immigrants, poor child health, poor hygiene, along with physical defects and mental defects. During this period, special education classes emerged and were made available by 1910. It was the determination that experts were needed to help with the process of child selection. During this time, practices originated for attendance officers, guidance counselors, school nurses and physicians, school psychologists, school social workers, and vocational counselors. In 1896, Leitner Whitmer founded the first psychological clinic in the United States at the University of Pennsylvania, and so he is considered the founder of school psychology. His goals were both prevention and intervention. Whitmer worked inductively from the specific case to the general condition. Granville Stanley Hall founded the APA in 1892, the American Journal of Psychology in 1887, and the Pedagogical Seminary in 1891. He's considered the leader of the child study movement. Special education grew rapidly after World War I. School psychology grew proportionally with that throughout the century. Goddard, Terman, and Gesell bridged Hall and Whitmer's work of child study, clinical psychology, and special education together, which led to greater scientific credibility. Arnold Gesell was the first person to hold the official title of school psychologist in the United States. Gesell primarily evaluated children and recommended special treatment. His main influence was the development of special education classes and a state-level Education Department for Exceptional Children. It seems that Whitmer was more like a school psychologist and Hall was more like an educational psychologist. Whitmer focused on the individual student and then worked to the general condition. He believed in the impact that teachers had in the diagnosis process. In relation to the information that Dr. Stevens presented in the video, Whitmer's studies seem more individually focused, which makes me think more of school psychology. Whitmer also emphasized practical field experiences in his training, almost like practicums. Hall's studies seem more deductive, which makes me think more of educational psychology. Hall seemed to work more with defining and identifying the normal child, quote unquote. This article provided information that helped me understand the origin of school psychology, Whitmer and Hall's contributions to the emergence of school psychology, the time frame of this emergence, and the different aspects that help to separate educational psychology and school psychology. In the book Human Learning, Janine Ormord begins Chapter 1 by giving the perspectives of learning. She defines learning as a long-term change in mental representations or associations as a result of experience. She explains that no matter how learning is defined, we know it has occurred only when we actually see it reflected in a person's behavior. All the knowledge that we have about learning has been gathered through research and data collection. Whether it is basic research or applied research, quantitative or qualitative data, each form of research and data has contributed to the understanding of human learning. Consistent research findings have helped psychologists develop learning principles and theories. Ormord states that learning principles identify certain factors that influence learning and describe the specific effects these factors have. For example, people learn by paying attention, which is a principle, so a reward for paying attention could increase learning, which is a theory. Ormord explains that principles and theories alike help us predict the conditions under which successful learning is most likely to occur. Ormord describes how learning theories evolved over time. Psychologists first began to study learning earnestly in the late 1800s. The two main perspectives were structuralism and functionalism. Psychologists argued that without more objective research methods, psychology as a discipline would never be a true science. These psychologists suggested that research should be conducted in a more objective, scientific manner by focusing on people's behaviors, responses, and environmental events, stimuli that precede and follow those responses. In the 1940s, some psychologists proposed the idea that people could learn by watching and then imitating. This information has helped me to understand the importance of research and how it helps educational psychology develop principles and theories. It seems that educational psychologists study the different research studies and can collect data in order to develop productive learning environments. School psychologists can take this research and apply it to specific situations. For example, a school psychologist can take the reinforcement principle and apply it to a specific student's individual behavior plan. A school psychologist can also create her own studies and data collection in order to add to the information that is already known with the theories and principles. So, educational psychologists and school psychologists are similar in the fact that they study the same information. What sets them apart is that a school psychologist makes this information more individualized for students. Reschle's article, The Present and Future Students of School Psychology in the United States, has helped me have a better grasp of the demand for school psychologists and has helped me gain a better understanding of the responsibilities required for a school psychologist. School psychology has experienced significant changes in the past 30 years and will continue to change in the years to come. With the information obtained from this article, I have a better understanding of how school psychology has changed in recent decades. Understanding the changes allows me to get a better grasp of how the roles and demographics help explain school psychology in general. It's important to see the historical changes, especially the legal changes, because it impacts how school psychologists must conduct their responsibilities. Reschle provided information in regards to the increase of women in the field, the number of specialists that will attain their doctorate degrees, and the demand for school psychologists. This information helps to demonstrate how school psychology is different from educational psychology. School psychologists have very specific roles in education, especially special education, whereas educational psychologists may not necessarily work in this type of specific setting, but may be in more of a variety of settings. On a personal note, I gained useful information in regards to consistent trends for school psychologists and the future outlook for this specific field. Overall, educational psychology and school psychology are very similar. From the information gained with each one's origins and founders, the two are intertwined. You can't have one without the other. Each field depends on research and data that is gathered in order to make changes to educational setting. Educational psychology is broader and seems to apply to the masses, whereas school psychology is more specific and seems to apply to the individual. Thank you.